Your career depends on three things: your skills, your reputation, your network. If you don't care about all of these, you will not get the best that you can have in your career. As an engineer, you can imagine that I cared a lot about my skills, never cared about my reputation, never cared about my network. Who cares? Something clicked in my mind. Okay, now I want not only to learn new skills because I have fun learning, so I want to still learn new things. But I also have to create a reputation. I need to create a strong network. So what I started doing is, okay, from now on, everything I do must be public to increase the reputation. It's called Design System Visual Coverage. And the idea is that when users visit preply.com, we check how the design system components impact what they see and what they interact with straight on their devices. So the idea is to sort of taking a screenshot of the page, coloring different parts of the page based on what comes from design system components and what not. And then we have a dashboard that shows very detailed data about, okay, every single page and every single team has this percentage of visual coverage. Visual coverage in the end is a metric that measures how much the design system impacts a single page. And we started working together as a 60 people team, something like that. And I was able to drive the design system to the rebrand. And we also intentionally created a lot of technical depth because during the rebrand, we needed many new components, but we didn't have the time to really think of how we implemented them. We just needed them. So we opted for creating new components based on Radix UI. We intentionally created technical depth that 2 years later, we still have to completely remove, but in the end, we delivered the rebrand.
Today's guest is Stefano Magni, senior front-end engineer and tech lead for the design system team at Preply. He's one of the rare engineers who's done it all, from building Flash mini games back when Internet Explorer 6 was around, to architecting React-based design systems used by millions. Stefano's career spans more than 15 years. He's led teams at WorkWave, Hasura, and Preply, taught testing best practices across Europe, and contributed countless open source tools and articles. At Preply, he's helping scale a design system that powers a global learning platform, complete with React Native parity, visual coverage, and a strong culture for data-driven engineering. Welcome, Stefano. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. How are you doing today?
Good.
Good Halloween.
It's Halloween. Yes, we're recording this as Halloween is happening around us. Spooky Halloween, as we call it.
I don't know what my daughter will do this evening.
No, does she have a costume?
Not yet, but let's see.
I do actually. I'm gonna be dressing up as Beetlejuice.
Wow,
from the
amazing.
movie. Yeah, I got like some green hair and everything. It's gonna be fun. I should have done this podcast in costume, to be honest, now that I think about it.
Yeah, I also have, some very stupid things because we were doing some crazy things at our official dev meeting, the internal dev meeting. So I was just wearing my Ray-Ban before.
like
Yeah, exactly. So maybe I should introduce myself, right?
Sure, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Stefano.
You told everything, but hi everyone. I'm very happy to be here today speaking with you and Dan. So Dan said everything. I'm Italian. I live in Italy on the Como Lake, if you want to know more details. And yes, it's true. It's been almost more than 15 years in the field, and I started as a Flash developer. So I also wanted to become a designer once, but one step at a time.
So how did you get into programming? What were your first steps?
Oh, yeah. Maybe it was 10 or 11. I don't remember, but I started playing video games and I just decided that I wanted to create video games. This was my original input. So I studied information technology at the high school, and then what you normally study at the high school. So assembly, C++, Java, databases. And I remember myself caring a lot about UI things because for example, when we were working in our C++ IDE, I remember that I was caring a lot about aligning the text in the grid and trying to reduce the number of interactions that the users have to do to accomplish a goal. So it's, I really care about UIs, yes.
So
After,
what
oh,
got
no,
you
sorry.
into Flash? What got you into Flash?
Well, it was my first job because after studying IT at the high school, I studied communication design at the university.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found a job a part-time job in a local web agency. And the idea was to be 50-50 designer and developer. But first, I was enjoying a lot being just a developer. Second, I realized that I wasn't good enough as a designer, let me be honest. So I became 100% developer, and it was Flash. I mean, in 2000, it was 2008, and
Okay,
everything was in Flash, everything. So I was
I
creating a lot
remember.
of mini games, super animated things. Your website was just one page with the Flash player in the middle. I had fun. A lot of fun.
And did your design background actually shape like your development strategy and how you think about the user experience?
It was not very much, let me say, a digital design communication university. So it was a
Okay.
classic design university, but it shaped how I think in general, because, at least in Italy, when we say design, we connect design to graphic. That's it. Design equals
Okay.
to graphic. But no, design is an approach. So that approach really stuck into my mind. And developing something or doing something else in your life, in the end, it's all about designing what to do. That's it.
Mm.
Sometimes. So this concept really stuck into my mind. Yeah.
Let me ask you this in the beginning of your career, because you were a designer before or you studied design and, design is
I
a
studied.
part of
Yeah.
you. Were you like a pixel perfect? Did you have like a pixel perfect approach to your implementations? Were you very like detailed oriented?
Of course. I'm a perfectionist at the core. So I worked with so many pixel perfect designers. And up to, okay, the Flash website or the website is ready, they were just taking a screenshot of the page, going to Photoshop, adding one layer, switching off and on the layer to find differences. So yes, it was very pixel perfect.
And have you kept with it? Are you still like pixel perfect now after 15 years? Do you consider it mandatory in today's world?
Pixel perfect at the core, but you need pragmatism, especially when you have to deal. Especially when you grow in your career. I'm not saying that you lose attention for details. I'm not saying that, but you really need to carefully choose what to do and what not. So you must accept trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
So you become a senior, you become, let me say, senior plus or staff, you name it. You must accept trade-offs. So you have to decide what things to really care of and what not. And I work in the design system team. So yes, we are perfectionists. No, not pixel perfect, let me say. And we can accept one pixel. Two no, but one yes.
Because also like I really admire your app. Like for my listeners that don't know, Preply is actually a learning platform, right? Where you study
It is.
languages. You have, and the app is very beautiful, gotta say.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it really changed everything, especially 2 years ago. But step by step, we will get to speaking about Preply. So
Of course.
I shaped my way of thinking in the web agency because I started as a part-time developer, but I worked almost 10 years in this web agency. I had so many things to learn and to study over these 10 years. I also had the opportunity to wear many caps because sometimes I was the project manager, sometimes I was the account. And this allowed me to shape my desire to understand stakeholders' needs. So, sometimes the stakeholders are your colleagues, sometimes they are the clients, but in the end, everyone is trying to achieve something. And when I was in the web agency, it was a small web agency. We were 10, then we grew to 20, but in the end, it was a small company. A lot of times, especially, for example, with the account, you speak a different language. So you have different goals, okay? But when you have to wear the cap of the account and you speak directly with the client, I mean, you understand what are the account manager goals. You understand why they have goals. But especially when you work with passionate people, the cool thing is that, okay, sometimes you disagree, sometimes you argue, but in the end, you and your colleague are both trying to achieve something very good.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to find a trade-off. You just have to find a shared language. You must try to understand what's their goal, and they have to understand what's your goal, etc., etc. I feel lucky because I've always worked with talented people in my life, and this really makes a difference.
What sorts of projects did you have at the web agency? Was it more advertised, or were you more like a consultancy
It was,
building
it was
project?
consultancy, and we changed the offer over the years because at the beginning we were just a graphic design agency,
Mm.
and we implemented everything from scratch in-house, and we created many super graphical websites, super interactive websites, very animated websites, mini games, project configurators, the kind of projects that, I mean, now we could call them SPAs or web applications, but at the time it was just a website, an animated website.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of projects I've always worked on. Then the web agency at some point changed a bit the trajectory because the goal was to offer a more holistic service in terms of communication consultancy, marketing consultancy. And that's why after 10 years, I left the company because I wanted to become a better front-end engineer. But we had a lot of fun working together. We also created a mobile application with Adobe Air. So in the end, it
Mhm.
was Adobe Flash that created native applications. And that application went first on a lot of European app stores for the iPad. And I worked with applications for smart TVs. Sometimes I also started speaking at conferences because, I mean, after 3 years working, I started joining conferences and I loved the atmosphere there. So I also wanted to become a speaker. So I started writing a couple articles. I started speaking at a couple conferences. Then for some years I stopped doing it, but I've always enjoyed speaking with people. What I learned, I learned everything in that web agency, but the hardest lesson for me after a couple of years working there, it's everyone was happy about my performance and me, and I was, let me say, more talented than the previous developer in the web agency. But it doesn't matter if you're more talented. You have to work with other people. So if you want to
Mhm.
create something, you have to create something with a team. And so the team, you must work well with the rest of the team. The rest of the team must work well with you. It wasn't clear to me. This wasn't clear when I started working. But when I realized it, I changed overnight. And after that, I'm really happy that everyone is really happy when they have to work with me. And this for me is super important because I really want to spread positivity to understand other ones, especially when you create software. In the end, the real complexity is communication. You
Mhm.
have to work with, it's a very social work. And I had to improve my social skills when I started working. I improved them and that was a success, something that I'm really proud today.
How did you improve them? What exercises did you take to become more social for people that don't have this knack?
I think that I've always been social,
Mhm.
but I've not always been very positive with my sociality, let me
Mhm.
say. In my opinion, I wasn't able to. Sometimes I created some sort of stress with the team
Mhm.
because I wanted more, because we had a problem. But again, this is not the way to solve problems with a team. So you must understand everyone else. You must understand their goals, their abilities, their talent. It's also not granted that everyone is so crazy passionate about their work, but it's okay. It's not a problem, and that's why the friction and the stress started happening. When I understood it, I just removed them. So I think that they've always been social, but not always in a very positive way.
Got it. Is there anything you miss from the old web, like Internet Explorer, Flash,
No,
or
no,
are you
no,
happy
no,
they're
no.
dead?
I mean, I was when I moved all my experience to vanilla JavaScript, Net Explorer 6 was a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So no, I don't regret anything. Maybe I mean, it's not a regret. Let me say that it was easier to make very fast websites, but only because let me say the users' expectations were quite low.
They were,
So
yes.
I'm not complaining about what we do nowadays. It was just a different era. Personally, I loved the ActionScript ecosystem, and in my opinion, at least a decade, OBA was the easiest way to create native applications. But in 2012, they killed Flash, and so they also killed Adobe A, and it's okay. I mean, let's move on. I started working with vanilla JavaScript, and I love it.
And now we React Native, right?
I'm not a React Native developer, but I'm making experience on the go, let me say. So I'm an expert in TypeScript and React, not yet React Native, but I'm learning on the go.
So let's move after your web agency adventure. What was next?
I moved to product development. So I moved to a couple small companies. One was an insurance comparison company. The second one was a Bitcoin startup. It was interesting because I had to learn about cryptos. At the same time, it was more or less 2017. And in parallel to my job, I also started helping people on Stack Overflow, writing articles, writing plugins, speaking at conferences, teaching, etc., etc. But it's a parallel thing that we can touch later on. So I moved to product development, and after a couple of small companies, I also started working for Workwave, and it was an amazing experience. Workwave is a field service company, which means that they create software to optimize vehicle routes. So if you have to move something with a vehicle from A to B, Workwave has the software for you. It was nice because it was the very first enterprise software. It was the very first huge code base. I also wanted to try being the team lead of the team because at that time I thought that I wanted to remain an IC. But to really find the answer, I thought, okay, let me become the team leader of the team. So if I can do the team leader, maybe I could do the manager if I like it. So let's try. Let me get out of my comfort zone. It was an amazing experience because I want to say hi to a lot of colleagues I had to work with, especially Matteo Ronchi, our front-end architect. I worked closely to him for almost 3 years, and I learned so much. I mean, I joined the company as a senior engineer, as a team leader, but compared to Matteo, I was just a newbie. And I learned so much from him. And he really changed how I work, especially on Codebases. It was an amazing experience because Workwave Route Manager, the software we were creating, has a very crazy complexity. Essentially, it's the way the backend is built. The backend is built around the algorithm to optimize the vehicle routes. Because of how it's built, and because at the time we didn't have any kind of help from the backenders because they were busy, we had to rewrite the software from scratch. It was 250k lines of code. We had to write it from scratch because it had performance issues. So we needed to make it super fast, and we created our own backend or front end in a web worker to aggregate the server data and provide it to the UI. Crazy complexity. It was an amazing project, and I learned a lot of things from Matteo about how to work on huge code bases. And despite the size of the code base, Matteo's approach was crazy. So everything was under control. Everything was perfect. We had no tests, but we never broke. We never anything for our clients. From time, I mean, almost every month, we were doing bigger factors because we found out that we had a better way to implement something, because we wanted to try out recoil. At the time, recoil was was quite new. We wanted to migrate from Webpack to Vite, and we did it. I also shared a very long article about this migration. So it was a very interesting experience. I learned so much from working with Matteo, and yeah, I loved it.
What's something you can share about best practices when working on large code bases?
I have many, and I mean, first of all, for who is going to listen to the podcast, I'm going to share a lot of articles for the video description after it. So don't worry about looking for my contents online. I have many best practices, but if I have to choose just one from those, I learned how TypeScript discriminated unions can help you shape your data so your types speak for you. I mean, you don't need documentation. We didn't need documentation because the discriminated unions were so friendly, were so self-explanatory that everyone could understand everything about the domain by just reading the types or just consuming the types. This was crazy because, I mean, you can imagine the types behind that kind of project were crazy, but everything was based on TypeScript discriminated unions. I love them because we never had something like, I don't know, this object can have an attribute, maybe, and the attribute is string. Never. The attribute is there or not, only based on a discriminator. For example, the status of the order. So you can imagine, for example, the delivery date of an order exists only if the order is in progress or is delivered, not when it's created. So, for example, if the order is created, you can't access the delivery date. There's no delivery date in the object. But if the status is delivered, you have the delivery date. It's a very simple thing, but I saw it in practice and it was working perfectly. And this was how we never broke the product despite we had 0 tests in such a big code base. But I'm going to share a longer article with many things I learned by working on big code bases.
It's very impressive. And what did you do that allowed you to make so many refactorings without having tests? Like, what gave you the confidence?
Discriminated unions again, and the same exact development patterns used everywhere. So if we had, I don't know, localizations, for example, and you had to consume localizations from a React component, you know, even before looking at the directory, you know that we had a React hook called use text. So we had something like 50, 60, 70 development patterns that were evolving, of course, but we respected them as hell, which means that if there is a comma that should not be there, I had to spend 2 hours with Matteo in a code review explaining why. And if it was a mistake, that mistake doesn't go to production. That's it. So it was a unique case, of course, because we were just a team of 4 front-enders working on a domain that the architect knew extremely well, and we had the freedom to do almost whatever we wanted. And it was a unique case, but it was working very well. It was working very well. Yeah. In the end, it was TypeScript discriminated unions. Up to the point that when I left for 1 month for paternity leave, we outsourced a small project, and we gave them our development patterns. They didn't follow the patterns, and when I got back, for example, I spent 1 day only trying to understand the domain types. It was crazy. I mean, how can you build something if your types are so generic? When you work on a front-end project, a lot of times you have to find trade-offs because, for example, if you use GraphQL, you know that GraphQL can, if you automatically create types from the backend, this can be very loose types. Or if you use GraphQL, a lot of things could be nullable, for example. So that's why, for example, in the frontend, we always converted the backend types into frontend types, which means having an extra layer of conversation, but it was something like funneling everything through a very strict check. Imagine like having Zod schemas at scale. This was the idea.
So basically TRPC before TRPC.
Yes.
That's
And
very cool.
after Workwave, I moved to Asura, the famous GraphQL engine. And after Asura, I joined Preply. So finally, we are at Preply now.
Is Preply the first place where you started the design system, or have you worked on design systems before Preply?
Never worked before, so I've always been a front-ender, but I've never had a professional experience in a design system team. Originally, I joined Preply in the platform team, not in the design system team. But in 2023, for different reasons, Preply didn't have a design system team anymore, but the rebrand was about to start. So, and it was not just changing the colors of the company. So it was the start of a new era, because the idea was that if we want to scale, we need to become a memorable brand. We need to become the Airbnb of the learning language market, essentially. So the rebrand was about to start, and we had a quite used design system, but we didn't have a design system team. And the design system complexity was so high that no one wanted to work on it in the end. So I just took my time. I spent a couple of weeks on the design system. I understood how it worked. Then I was able to drive. The rebrand was nice because we had to rebrand everything. Of course, starting from the most important pages, but in the end, we were rebranding 70% of the whole company. And we kind of created one big team of all the front-enders, of the designers and many managers. And we started working together as a 60 people team, something like that. And I was able to drive the design system to the rebrand. And we also intentionally created a lot of technical depth, because during the rebrand, we needed many new components, but we didn't have the time to really think of how we implemented them. We just needed them. So we opted for creating new components based on Radix UI. I mean, we intentionally created technical debt that 2 years later, we still have to completely remove. But in the end, we delivered the rebrand. In October, the rebrand was out. The company was pink, this pink. And so it was so nice. Then I asked to remain in the design system team. So we had to create a new design system team from scratch, of course. So now we are 6 people. At the time, it was just me and the designer. And we also needed to join how Preply operates, because Preply is very data-driven, which means everything is data-driven.
So 2 questions actually, but first, like at current level, how does something go from Figma to the website? How is the design system process inside of your company?
We are still defining it, because I mean, it's not in the design system team. You can imagine the kind of research that there is behind every single component, the kind of perfection level. In terms of how our users, our designers and our developers could use the component, or how they need to customize the component for their needs. What we are trying to define now is how to really serve our users, because we inherited the design system from the previous team, but the design system, first of all, kudos to the team, because they grew the design system organically in the company in a very, not in a perfect context for them, so kudos to them. But the design system was very close, didn't allow many customizations, but this doesn't work well in a company like Preply, which is data-driven and experiment-based. So we launch countless experiments every day, and you can imagine that at this pace, teams can't really use your components if they are so closed. You need to make them customizable at some degree, let me say. So right now we are trying to define this, which is a very interesting project, because it means in the end, again, being very social with the designers and trying to understand teams' needs, trying to understand where the company is going to go, which means, okay, maybe if now we are experimenting a lot on the AI side, it means that maybe everything we do on AI, it's granted that they can't use the design system. First, because they are experimenting. Second, because they need customizable components, and our components are not customizable. So we are trying to change these processes. The idea is to create sort of sort of layers between one-off components and design system components. Because what we do in the design systems, you can imagine that the kind of quality we need to use in the design system is too much for launching a new experiment in 2 weeks. It's too much because we create a component which is used on 2 different platforms from 20 different teams with 3 different technology stacks. It must be everything must be super accessible. Everything must be from a JavaScript API customizable. I mean, teams can't reach this kind of quality. But what they can do is what we want them to do is to discover what other teams are doing. So the idea is that if team A creates something and team B needs to create something similar, before creating it, get in touch with team A, let's see if we can discover what other product teams are doing, and then let's start reusing and making components a bit more generic. At some point, we will promote them to the design system. So let me say that we are still defining all the processes. So it's still a new team, and we also had to work for a long time on our metrics because, again, Preply is data-driven. I can tell you more about this, of course.
How do you measure adoption because you're data-driven?
At the moment, we created I'm not objective. It's a cool project.
Of course.
It's called Design System Visual Coverage. And the idea is that when users visit Preply.com, we check how the design system components impact what they see and what they interact with straight on their devices. So the idea is to sort of taking a screenshot of the page, coloring different parts of the page based on what comes from design system components and what not. And then we have a dashboard that shows very detailed data about, okay, every single page and every single team has this percentage of visual coverage. Visual coverage in the end is a metric that measures how much the design system impacts a single page. But of course, we have this for all the pages. At the moment, this is how we track. It's not very much. In the end, it's an option. So this is how we are tracking it at the moment. And by the way, I wrote 2 very long articles about this topic. And the Design System Visual Coverage project is open source because we worked so much on it to make it super perfect. Because you can imagine that we must calculate the design system adoption on users' devices without impacting the UX. So we needed to go creative with the performance optimizations. Now we are thinking of introducing also some static analysis data like omelette.dev does, essentially a dashboard where you can use AST to check, or React Scanner, for example. React Scanner is the most famous library for this. You can check in your code base how many times the design system components are used, how many times every single prop for every single component is used, etc., etc. Why this? Because this is tied to how Preply works. So Preply is data-driven, which means that Preply gives general directions to the teams. Teams come up with specific goals for their domain area. Along with the goals, they must have metrics to measure that they are progressing to the goals. Because, it's like if in the product field is natural, like, okay, we want to increase conversions from 0 to 50. Okay, nice. We are going to implement to increase conversions. We are going to do A, B, C, D, and F. If we did everything, but the conversions didn't increase, we still have to work on this. So this is how Preply use metrics to understand if teams are progressing to their goals. And this also applies to the platform teams, like the design system team, like the DevX team, etc. So the idea is that you must have metrics that not police metrics. So the idea is not to go to teams and saying, hey, you're not using the design system very much. This is not the goal. The goal is for us to understand we created 5 components because we thought that by doing this, we could have, for example, centralized all the models used in the product, for example. But if our metric says that no, we are not, they are still using the old models, maybe we did something wrong. We need to get in touch with them. We need to understand why they are not using the new dialogue, etc., etc., etc. So this is how we use metrics. Because in Preply, you don't do something. You do something to achieve a goal measured through a metric. This is why Preply is so data-driven. And that's why also the design system team needs to be so data-driven. The goal is that we need to measure that we are really progressing.
Mm-hmm.
The company, I mean, many times I got asked, yes, I know why they want metrics, because you have to justify your salary. You need to justify if they need the design system team. No, this is not the goal. This is not the goal, absolutely. It's for us. Again, for us as a team, we need to understand if what we are doing is really working for our users or not. And we need metrics, because you can't just be based on ideas, words of mouth. No, it's not enough. We need metrics.
Does it also justify product decisions? Like, for example, they realize that an arrow on the button is more important on the right than on the left, let's say, a simplistic approach. But then you say, hey, look, this button is used in 400 pages. It impacts 80% of our customers. Is this a change that we want to do because it can have really high impact?
Yeah, that's how, for example, experiments born. So if they want to change the icon placement in the button, for example, okay, go and do that, because if you find out that moving the button, moving the icon increases the conversions by 0.5%, and we have 1 billion users, hey, maybe you found a new pattern that work. Then we have to check, wow, why it's working that page. Let's scale the experiment to another page. Oh, it's working also there. Cool. Okay, let's change the design system then. Or let's change the system giving more options, because maybe, I don't know, there are some pages where it works best and other pages when it doesn't work very much. But in the end, this is how experiment works. So if they want to change, I mean, no one changes our ping, but imagine that someone want to change the ping. Okay, they run an experiment, they change the ping, and if it converts better, let's speak about the ping. Of course, an exaggerate.
Of course.
This is exaggerated, because, of course, we have brand guidelines. But probably these kind of experiments, I don't know precisely how many experiments they launch every day, but they launch a lot of experiments. And it's cool, because we learn something new by running experiments, right?
Yeah, of course. And are the experiments tied at the design level system? So can you running experiments directly with the design system, or do you have to basically copy the component inside of the experiment, and you have the design system component and the copy component, and you experiment with them?
The experiments never start from the design system,
Mm-hmm.
because the design system always come, let me say, late compared to what teams are doing. Because in the design system, we consolidate new patterns. So you can imagine that maybe they ran 20 experiments, they promoted 10 of these experiments. Out of these experiments, a new pattern is burning. And of course, we are aware what's happening there. And we can decide if we want to give them something that can customize easily to achieve their new pattern, or we could just help them, for example, centralizing the pattern. Sometimes it could be that, okay, I mean, you have a new pattern. Now we have 5 teams using the new pattern. Please, the implementation of the new pattern must be here. The Figma files for the new pattern must be here. And we help them, for example, making the new pattern fully accessible. So if this new pattern becomes more and more widely used, at some point, we will take it and we will move it to the design system. But the idea is that it's already accessible, for example. It's already super tested. So it really depends case by case.
Where do you keep your component library? Do you have like a npm package for it? Where does it live? So I was asking, does your design system component library live in an npm package?
Yes.
And
Yes.
my follow-up question would be, how do you separate React to React Native?
We have 2 completely different implementations. So we have some shared code, but let me be honest, it's just 20% of the design system code. We have token generation for 2 different platforms, and we have component implementation for two different platforms. Almost nothing is shared because they have very different constraints in general. I mean, until you reach a certain scale, I'm not a friend of unifying everything. Our design system is still small, to be honest, and I don't see an advantage of trying to fit two different platforms in the same implementation. Let's just implement twice the components, and that's it. At some point, we will decide what to do. But I mean, they have different peculiarities, and different components also need different APIs because the developers working on the app or web use different APIs. Even if an interesting project that we had in Preply, I mean, now our frontenders are working both on the front end of Preply.com and on the UI of our application. It wasn't the case 1 year ago, but our app core team decided that, I mean, it's not scalable to just continue hiring React Native engineers. First, because it's hard to find them. Second, because, I mean, in the end, when you implement something in the product, you have to implement the same UI into different products, into different platforms. So our app core team started training frontenders because we had more web frontenders than mobile frontenders. They started training web frontenders. So now in the same team, the same developers can implement both on web and app. And they expect the same APIs for the same component, but internally the design system has two different implementations for
Where does who implements it first? In what
web.
platform? In web. So if
Yeah.
web is first and then mobile.
Yeah.
I used to work at Glovo and we were doing the reverse. So it was always mobile first.
Yeah, I see. Preply is, let me say, desktop first product because normally everything is based on their classroom experience. So in Preply, you take language lessons, and I don't know, but maybe 95, if not more, 95% of our lessons happen on a desktop. So I see why also for SEO purposes, SEM purposes, everything started from web in general. And for example, another big initiative that they started a couple years ago and now it's going well, it's feature parity. Because 3 years ago, we didn't have the same feature parity on web and app. Now the situation is way better. Yeah. Apart from, I don't know, 10% of them, because they are really platform related. In the end, developers expect the same APIs, and it makes sense.
Gotcha. I want to ask about token generation. Like, how do you do it?
It's crazy. I mean, it's at the moment we don't Figma and code are not connected. So if we introduce new tokens, we have to manually add them to the code. Let me say that it's not very much about the tokens themselves. We have a code generation step that generates out of a JSON with the tokens, generates styles for React Native. Less files has CSS files and TypeScript variables and JavaScript variables and TypeScript types. So it's a complex code generation step. So when I joined the company and I wasn't a design system expert, I loved that code generation step because it allowed me. It has so strong guardrails that I wasn't able to drive the whole company with the design system without design system experience. So it was nice. Now that we are working on it, we are going to remove a lot of these layers. For example, we have a layer that hashes the name of the token in a CSS variable to be used in the web product. But okay, we don't want to hash the name. Why hashing the name? We prefer to have the same name, even if it's a CSS variable. It could happen that someone at some point used the CSS variable directly instead of using our less or SSS APIs. It's true, but okay, it's fine. So what we found out in these 2 years is that code generation is too complex for us. We don't want it. Simply, we don't want it. We will keep it for something because, of course, when you duplicate too many things, it's hard to maintain. But in the team, we all agree that the right amount of duplication is acceptable. I mean, as an engineer in general, in my experience, I think that we engineers, we tend to overestimate abstractions and overestimate the maintenance of duplication. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, if you have to maintain 100 applications, it's a problem. But if you have to maintain 3 applications and you know where they are and you have tests to check that they are not misaligned, it's way better to have 3 small duplications compared to having the wrong abstraction for removing 3 duplications, because a lot of times we implement wrong abstractions. So I'm not against abstractions, but I think that we overestimate the impact of duplication. So I'm kind of duplication oriented. Not for everything, but I'm kind of duplication oriented.
Gotcha. And I wanted to ask, in your design system, how do you enforce accessibility, make sure accessibility is followed? How do you build for accessibility in 2 different products,
Yeah.
like React Native and web?
Let me be honest, at the moment we are building it mostly for the web, and
Mhm.
for app, we will focus on the app maybe next year. The idea is that, in the design system, let me say, we are accessibility experts. Okay.
Mhm.
We know what to build and we just use the Storybook plugin. But in
Mhm.
the product, we implemented an infrastructure again to measure the accessibility violations on users' devices. Of course, you know that the amount of accessibility violations that you can find automatically is maybe just 30% of the real accessibility problems that you have in the product. But at least it's a first step, because we have an internal dashboard with all the accessibility violations per page and per team measured on users' devices. And usually having a metric and having a dashboard is the first thing that you have to do in PHP. When you do them, when you have them, okay, you are playing the PHP game. And when you're playing the PHP game, everything will happen. Also because accessibility goes hand in hand with a great initiative that started 6 months ago, more or less, which is engineering excellence. Engineering excellence is the dream of every engineer, and it's happening for real in PHP. I'm not kidding. It's happening for real. It's not just something written in Confluence. Because it's true, we are 800 people in PHP, but what I appreciate about PHP is that when they want to change, PHP changes, and changes very quickly. So for example, why caring about engineering excellence? Our principal engineer made a research some time ago and showed the results of this research that was something like, our business is going perfectly. We are growing as hell. We have the money. Perfect. Everything is perfect. But if you look at developers' productivity, is getting worse and worse, worse and worse. So it's cool that we are doing well as a business, but at some point we can't hire 3 times the same engineers to do the same thing. It doesn't scale. This doesn't scale because at some point, if the business doesn't go extremely well, we are so slow that we can't react to the market. So the idea is that, okay, why the developer's productivity is getting lower? Because we never cared about engineering excellence in the end. But it was not a byproduct. It was intentional, because this was written in Preppy's culture. Until 2 years ago, Preppy's culture had a big pillar. We are hackers. Go to production. That's it. We don't care about anything else. We need to find a space in this market. We need to grow as a business. We don't care about how you implement things. They must work in production. That's it. It was part of our culture, and that's enough. But 2 years ago, and this is another thing I love about Preply. Preply guides what you do to goals and how you do it to the culture. So we have a very, very, very strong culture. So culture is not just written in Confluence, it's everywhere. So we hire people that's aligned to our culture. We have a lot of internal events for our culture. They evolve the culture to steer how we work. Our performance reviews and our salaries are connected to the culture pillars, because I'm evaluated on what I did and how I did it. How is our culture. If I did something amazing without respecting the culture, no, it's not okay. I have to respect our culture. And for example, this is a nice example of how Preply steer how we operate to the culture. We were hackers. Then we decided that we need to become a strong and memorable brand. We need to become the Airbnb of the learning language market. which means that now we need perfection. We need perfection. I mean, we also need to go fast because our market is fast. But if you have to balance speed and quality and you can't, you change the scope. So instead of doing 10 things, you are going to do 3 things because you can't just push out an experiment that works so and so. No, it must create a perfect user experience, because if you are a new user, you come to the platform and the platform is buggy, you just leave the platform forever. This is not acceptable today. So 2 years ago, with the rebrand, they changed our culture, and now they removed "we are hackers." Now we are not hackers anymore. Now we have another pillar, which is keep perfecting. Engineering excellence is part of the keep perfecting. I mean, I can't hide that I love Preply because I love how it works. The positivity in the company is extremely high. Everyone wants to improve everything. It's clear how it works very quickly. And for example, I remember that when a new manager joined us from booking.com, he told me, well, it's been 2 weeks and it's crazy how people is passionate about our product. You never see turned off cameras in meetings. So you share what you're doing, and everyone bombards you with a lot of questions because they care about what you're doing. Maybe it's because, I mean, our product solved a problem that we had. I mean, I'm Italian. My English was bad. Now I'm not saying that it's perfect, but it improved thanks to Preply. So I really love our product. Getting back to accessibility and engineering excellence, this is Preply. We need to change how we operate. We change our culture. People have to adapt to the new culture. We adapt our processes to the new culture. We stopped being hackers. Now we keep perfecting. Of course, you can imagine that we need to cover tons of technical depth that we introduced, but it's okay. We introduced it intentionally, and now we are bit by bit removing it intentionally.
That's good. That's good. I was gonna ask also about you. Like you've built like a huge online presence, like on GitHub, your
Yes,
articles, your conferences. Like, why do you do it? What's the reason that you share so much in public?
I have an anecdote. I was commuting on the train. It was 2018, 2017. It was Wednesday. I remember it. I was on the train and I opened a tweet that was saying, your career depends on 3 things: your skills, your reputation, your network. If you don't care about all of these, you will not get the best that you can have in your career. As an engineer, you can imagine that I cared a lot about my skills, never cared about my reputation, never cared about my network. Who cares? Something clicked in my mind. So, okay, now I want not only to learn new skills because I have fun learning, so I want to still learn new things, but I also have to create a reputation. I need to create a strong network. So what I started doing is, okay, from now on, everything I do must be public to increase the reputation. Instead of learning things by myself, I went to Stack Overflow. I started answering people. So I was learning, and in parallel, I was helping other people solving their problems with what I was learning, because I realized that even if I was just a beginner with some topics, I was more expert than them. And so I started answering in Stack Overflow. And Stack Overflow answers are public. Then I realized that they almost had the same problems. So I started writing plugins to help them. They had the same understanding problems. I started writing articles to help them. And this is more reputation. At some point, I was writing so many articles that why not converting the articles into talks? I started speaking at meetups. So meetups are always waiting for speakers, right, Dan?
I know.
And so I started speaking at so many meetups. I started speaking at conferences. My end goal was also to teach, because when you are able to teach something, it means that you know that topic very well. I mean, you still have gaps in your knowledge, but it's fine. More than once it happened that I was teaching and I said, I don't know this. I think it works this way, but I will get back to you next week, maybe. Writing articles, speaking at meetups, speaking at conferences, teaching, creating GitHub plugins and GitHub repositories. I mean, I created a strong reputation around and of course, meetups and conferences and courses means strong network. So I was learning, I was speaking about what I was learning and what I was applying at work, because again, I also suffer from imposter syndrome, which means that if I have to speak with you about something, at least I must have 6 months of experience, because I mean, I need to be able to answer every question. That's how I started speaking at conferences, and it worked very well because I mean, I'm not saying that I'm famous. I'm not saying that. But for example, in the Italian ecosystem, if someone needs help with tests on the front end, Stefano Magni is the name. Nice. It's perfect. And it's also very rewarding because it happened a couple of times that at some conferences, they stopped me saying, "Hey, Stefano, maybe you don't remember about me. I participated in a course of yours 5 years ago. Thank you so much. You changed my life. Now I understand everything about tests. You helped me so much. Thank you." I mean, what's better? And
That's a good feeling.
yeah, that's how I started working in public, essentially. And I suggest everyone doing the same. I mean, the problem usually, I also gave an internal talk at Preply, trying to push more engineers doing the same, because the problems are always the same. I mean, time. Okay. I mean, you can do something about time, but I know time. Okay, I sacrificed a lot of my time for writing articles, and I mean, sometimes now that I have a daughter, I don't have so much time, but it's still part of my activities. They have fear for the stage because they are not used to speaking public. But it's not only about creating the network, but it's also a shortcut to become senior, because when you are senior or staff engineer, in most of your work is convincing people, is presenting things, is to summarize and express things the best possible way. And when you have to speak at a conference, it's the same. You are doing the same thing. So our work, especially when it goes very senior, it's a very social work.
That's true.
And I mean, it also happened that when I was doing the interviews, the developers interviewing me knew me and knew my articles. They read them. You see, I mean, instead of just trying to understand, okay, is Stefan a good developer? He's able to write JavaScript. He's able to write tests. How he thinks. I mean, most of these answers are on my blog, so you can find the answers, and we can have a different kind of discussion. Suggest everyone to. Oh, sorry. And the last problem is that we think that what we do is not unique. So, okay, I mean, it's just a design system. Everyone has a design system. It's just storybook. It's just tests. It's just performance. Yes, but more or less, we are all solving the same problems, but in different contexts. So the context that I have at Preply to solve a performance problem or an accessibility problem is completely different from another company. So what I do, how I do it, in which context, with which people, at which stage of the company is unique. It's true. In the end, I'm improving performances, I'm improving accessibility, but maybe this is 50%, if not less, of my work. Because you have to understand how I came to solve this problem this exact way. And this is because of the context. The context is unique. So everything you do is unique. Of course, sometimes you do something that you know it's more advanced. The design system visual coverage, I knew that it was a new project no one worked on. When I migrated the large code base to Vite many years ago, I knew that no one did it, or at least did it publicly. But out of the 50 articles that I wrote, only 3-4 times I did something really new. All the other times it was solving problems that someone has solved, but in a different context, which means that what I'm doing is unique. So no, I mean, you have to tell a lot. You have to tell a lot about what you do, and everything you do is unique. I suggest this because, I mean, you will benefit a lot from your network. You will benefit a lot from your reputation. You will find better jobs where you will meet better people. You will earn more money. You will have many, many, many advantages. I know that I don't have to say this to you, Dan, because I see that you are super active. I know, but you can't imagine how much time I spend with engineers trying to break this wall of No, I don't have anything to share. No, I don't want to speak. No, I'm just a mediocre developer. You aren't.
I have the same problem even getting people to come to a meetup. Like, just come and network, have a beer, talk to other developers, see what problems they're having.
And it's true, your career depends on this. Of course, when the market is perfect and they are throwing you their money, like during the pandemic, everything is okay. But when the market is not perfect, I'm not saying that only the network counts, but the network counts a lot. Of course, you can't invest in your network and not in your skills. Always
course.
network, reputation, and skills at the same time. It's hard. Maybe sometimes you learn a bit slower, it's true. But there's something that can't see those shared ones that stuck in my mind. It's not about what you know and who you know. It's all about who knows you and what they know that you can do.
Makes sense.
If you can do the most amazing things, but no one is aware, you will miss some opportunities in your life.
For sure. And speaking about skills, one question, I think that our final question, we're on almost on time. I was going to ask you to recommend a book, maybe a technical book or a non-technical book, something my listeners can enjoy.
Only one.
As many as you want. I ask at least one.
3 books.
Three
My
books. Let's
my
go.
favorite ones are a non-technical one, the Lean Startup. I love
The Lean Startup. I
Yeah.
actually have that one. Yes.
I was sure. The Lean Startup. Then The Art of Readable Code.
The Art of Readable Code.
Yes, it's a very nice book. And the third one is The Art of Unit Testing, the third edition with, if you are a front-end developer, there are JavaScript examples. I love these 3 books.
The Art of Unit Testing.
Yes.
Unit testing. Okay. Wow, that's very nice. The cover looks really good
Yeah.
for the unit examples
and also
in JavaScript.
and also the art of readable code. I really, it's what I learned when working with the front-end architect at Workwave. Think of how many code is written once, is refactored 10 times, is read 100 times, it's run a million times. So of course it must work because it's run a million times, but it's read 100 times, it's
That needs to
refactored
be
10 times.
readable.
So what's the goal of writing code? Is not to write the code. It's to write runnable code that anyone can read, that everyone can refactor. And for everyone, I also mean LLMs, because LLMs benefit from what humans benefit from. Readability is one of these.
That's true. Amazing, Stefano. Thank you so much for joining.
Oh,
I think we
thank you.
covered a lot of things. I had such a pleasure talking to you. Hope to see you soon. I know you're coming to Barcelona next week.
Yeah.
Maybe if you have time, we can catch a beer.
Thank you so much for having me. And please go to preply.com/careers because we hire many engineers in Barcelona. We have many open positions, also in London and also in Kiev, but mostly Barcelona. Again, I hope that I share something about how Preply works. I can't hide. I really love Preply. And come working with me.
We'll have in the description links for Preply, links for all of Stefano's articles. I would actually recommend the one you wrote about improving INP in performance. I really enjoyed that one.
That's another, and it's another good example. Everyone's improved performance, right? But why my article has been liked by Adi Osmani, Scott Russell, Nadia Makarevich, because I gave so many context about it. So
yep, it's very detailed, and I think people
start writing articles. Start speaking, please.
Amazing, Stefano. Thank you so much. See you later.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.